Someone asked me on an airplane the other day what I do for a living, and I struggled to explain it, and I said, ultimately, I think I'm a neurotransmitter. On a good day, I'm dopamine. On a bad day, I'm cortisol. What really the Institute's about is translating the work and making it accessible. So what's the field? Let's get into that. The neuroscience of decision-making and problem-solving, staying cool under pressure, collaborating with others, and facilitating change. And the first 3 summits, we actually spent a lot of the time working out what is the pedagogy of the field, and we landed on these 4 domains. And there was a lot of debate and argument. But it's holding together pretty well as the organizing structure. So it's the neuroscience of these issues. And the field draws from a lot of domains, but there's a huge amount of research that we draw from. There's the research on the brain, which mostly is not that relevant. So neuroanatomy through to neuroimaging. This stuff is not so relevant to leadership, obviously. The work on more of the mind, attention, perception, cognition, memory, etc. These fields, are a little bit more relevant to leadership. These are foundational fields, but then there's these research domains with many scientists. Things like interpersonal neurobiology, the study of insight, self-awareness, social cognitive neuroscience, decision science, emotional regulation research. These kind of 6 areas are each have anywhere from maybe a dozen to 400 researchers, hardcore neuroscientists working in them. Even mindfulness has 150 neuroscientists working in it now, doing hardcore neuroscience research on mindfulness itself. So those are the domains that we draw from quite directly, and then the field itself draws, from all of it, but especially from the top 6. But just a sort of contextual piece before we get into the research a bit. A contextual piece, if you run into a neuroscientist in a bar, they're going to look at you funny if you say, I'm bringing this work into OD. Firstly, they won't understand what OD means. But they'll say to you, well, most of the neuroscience is not relevant. And this is definitely true. Most neuroscience is not relevant to your work. There are 50,000 neuroscientists at the Society for Neuroscience Summit every year. Most of them will not talk to you, and you wouldn't want to talk to them. They're molecular. Okay, no offense to that. Sounds like I'm insulting them, doesn't it? Molecular people, terrible. But they're very nice people, but they're looking at the stuff that's not so much relevant to leadership at all. And they will tell you, in fact, they'll chastise you, and they'll say there's just so much about the brain that we don't know that we almost shouldn't, be bringing it into leadership. And then there's areas that we have some research enough to be sort of dangerous. But the reality is there's only a small subset of areas that we have high certainty of, where there's enough studies done in enough different labs, enough different cultures and countries, that we can say pretty confidently, this appears to be a pretty solid, fact of the brain. And I'm going to share some of those. And it turns out that those nuggets, which are very, very small, only make up a small fraction of all the research. And the neuroscientist is right. From a neuroscience perspective, we may not know. But from a leadership perspective, what's amazing is those nuggets are really, really, really important. And they actually explain a lot of the things that are not working in our organizational change practices. They explain a lot of the things that we need to rewire in many ways. And the other thing is that the current. Let me do this with a question rather than tell you. Who's involved in developing leaders? Put your hand up if you're involved in developing leaders at all. A lot of people. Okay. Put your hands up if it's going really well and you know exactly how to do it. Okay. All right. That's the point I wanted to make. There was a couple of furtive hands went up, which is excellent news. Okay. But by and large, it's the theories we currently have are not really working so well. And so these nuggets turn out to be very, very, very helpful, even though they're only a small percentage of all the research about the brain overall that are actually coming out. So just be careful if you're going to go out and sort of talk about neuroleadership and talk about the science. Be careful of sort of giving the impression that we know enough. We know so much. We don't. There's a lot we don't know, but some of the nuggets are really, really important. We'll talk about one of those and sort of one of the findings that's pretty interesting. You've probably seen this idea before of the leadership pipeline. I think it's a wonderful idea, and the leadership pipeline idea expresses the big neural changes that happen as people become more senior in their leadership functions. For those of you who can't see over the heads, it says individual, line manager, manager of managers, and executive. So when you go from being an individual contributor to suddenly being a line manager, you have to give up the circuitry for doing the work a little, and develop this whole new circuitry. And when you go from line manager to manager of managers, again, you have to have this whole kind of change in your circuitry. You've got to give up kind of actually delegating the specific work and think about it, things in a whole other level. And it sort of hurts people's head a lot in many ways. And as an executive, it's a whole other level as well. And so this research isn't new. You know that the technical skills, the requirement for technical skills goes down a little bit. In really technical companies, maybe the gradient is less. But the requirement goes down, and you probably know that the self and social awareness of these people kind of goes up. The need for self and social awareness goes up. But here's the thing that the neuroscience is both explaining and sort of posing some questions on. Our capacity for self and social awareness goes down as we become more senior. Our actual capacity to literally think about ourselves and think about other people as we take a senior role in an organization goes down considerably. Doesn't that explain a lot? It actually keeps you all in a job, by the way, so don't argue too much. It keeps you busy. It's a good thing. I notice this in colleagues. I'll work over long time with someone inside an organization who's maybe the sort of junior person in OD and then gets a senior role, more senior role, and I'll follow them in their career, and I'll watch their sort of neural capacity sort of go downhill as they get more senior, and I'll watch them become less and less capable of just thinking straight, never mind thinking about people. And a lot of that is the volume of information they're struggling under and the amount of threat that they're dealing with. So, to cut a long story short, we need better tools for increasing self and social awareness of leaders. There are two really difficult challenges in the world. Does anyone have teenage kids here? Does anyone have teenage kids? Okay, so that's the first really difficult challenge in the world, is bringing up kids, and my 8-year-old's getting me warmed up for that already. And the second really difficult challenge in the world is improving the self and social skills of really high status individuals. It's a very tough challenge. Teenagers think that they're really high status individuals, by the way. You just ask them. But improving the self and social skills of high status individuals is very tough, and the research is explaining why that's important and also how to do it. So what the research is doing is it enables deeper self and social skills development with more people at more senior levels. In other words, having brain research is actually getting people to pay attention in different ways. Now, some of you might say, well, it's just sexy, it's just packaging, and it's just, the new flavor of the month, and understanding the brain is, this new thing, and that's fair enough. I don't know that's going to go away for a long time, though. I'm not sure where we're going to go after. It's kind of pretty central, understanding the actual functioning of the brain. It's sort of like saying 150 years ago that, understanding the body is going to go away. That's a fad. Understanding, blood diseases, that's a fad. I think it's going to be around for a very long time. But the brain research does something really important. What it does is basically the research is speaking to people about self and social awareness in a language that makes sense. Okay? Now, it makes sense for a number of reasons. Firstly, it's more tangible, and the brain prefers tangible. It prefers tangible over intangible, very simply. The second reason is it's scientific. The third reason is it's evidence-based, and it has that kind of stewardship of peer review and other things taken into account. So the research is maybe in some cases saying the exact same thing as other research from psychology or systems theory or adult learning theory. But it's saying it in a language that leaders are more willing to pay attention to. Now, what that does, that willingness to kind of think about an idea, enables or increases the chance of leaders developing common language for what? Common language for how they function and other people function. Now, what's the value of that? Common language creates the potential for self-regulation. Okay, how behavior change happens, this is absolutely central. Behavior change happens when we notice something as it's occurring and we alter behavior. Okay, we can't get rid of our habits, we can't stop ourselves doing something, we can alter though, and the way that we alter best is on the fly by noticing particular behaviors. We can't notice a behavior if we don't have language for it. We have to have language for it to actually be able to shift it.